What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I'm a musician and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. As always, I thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for rocking with me on a daily and weekly basis. Thank you for checking out the podcast that I do with DB. Thank you for going to zambonifunk.com, where you can find music. You can find reading. You can get a reading very much like this one, 10 minutes. I'll talk to the camera. You give me your birth information and a question, and I'll break it down for you. Where are we at in time? This shit is a deal. It's only $30. We also could do a Zoom reading where we can talk back and forth for an hour and, like really get in depth here with this kind of thing. I've had a few repeat people coming back recently. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here with me as always. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week we have new moon in Virgo is coming up here. That'll be tomorrow. New moon in Virgo is going to be opposite to Saturn in Pisces. So when we think about Saturn in Pisces, then Saturn is the planet of authority and restrictions and boundaries and discipline and challenges and obstacles, shit like that, right? New moon in Virgo. Virgo is going to be the planet or the sign that has to do with like details and all the little pieces of things, right? Like the sort of nuts and bolts of how to make stuff actually work. So I actually typically like Saturn stuff in relationship to Virgo stuff, because there's something about like really putting in the work to make it function that is inherent here in this kind of situation. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is that the new moon in Virgo is going to be ruled by Mercury in Leo. So Mercury has just turned forward and direct and is now moving in a forward direction. So the Mercury things are no longer going to be sort of like mired in all of the confusion and miscommunication and delays and all the upset that is typically associated with Mercury retrograde. But we can notice that Mercury in Leo is making a close square to Uranus in Taurus. So this is likely to, Mercury and Uranus together are very good at experimentation, very good at innovation, new ideas, especially since Uranus is, in Taurus, it's like there's something like practical, eminently practical about like, what if we just like tinker with the thing and like set it into motion and like see how it actually operates, right? That sort of thing. So to see Mercury making this square to Uranus definitely looks, it's rebellious. It's not trying to follow your rules. It's not trying to like, do the thing that is supposed to be done, or, it's like, it's going to work around things. It's going to be anti-repressive in some kind of way. So to see that Mercury ruling the moon that is opposite to Saturn, it looks like some kind of like rebellion against authority figures of some sort. It looks like, it could be inventive in some kind of way. Whenever I think about Saturn and Uranus, I can remember back when Saturn was in Aquarius and making a square to Uranus and Taurus. And the thing that I said over and over during that time was that necessity is the mother of invention, right? So Saturn being the planet of obstacles and heavyweight responsibility, obligation, all that sort of stuff, right? And then Uranus being this kind of like experimental or new thing, like Uranus might be associated with a light bulb moment, that like eureka, like aha, I found it, that sort of thing, right? So there's a kind of like heavyweight responsibility that drives new ideas and this kind of thing. So I think that there's something like really interesting and useful about that, although because it is an opposition, we've got an opposition between the new moon and the sun, and so that's of course the moon and the sun in the same spot. That's what the new moon is, and then opposite to Saturn. And this is, in fact, the sort of archetypal relationship that the luminaries have with Saturn. Cancer is opposed to Capricorn. Cancer is the sign ruled by the moon, as opposed to Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. Leo is the sign ruled by the sun, is opposite to Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn. So these two have an inherently opposite relationship to Saturn. So to see that kind of thing going on here definitely looks like butting heads. It looks like it is uncomfortable in some kind of way. And in fact, we might be doubling down on discomfort this week as we see Mars moving into Cancer. So Mars has been in Gemini for a period of time, for like 6 weeks or something like this, which is a typical amount of time for Mars to be spending in a sign. as Mars moves into Cancer, so Mars in Cancer is in fall. So a fall is a position where a planet is not necessarily weak. A planet in fall is often strong, but perhaps strong in ways that can get in the way, or in ways that can be counterproductive toward the ends that you're trying to get toward, right? So Cancer is frequently associated with the home or nurturing in some kind of way. One of my favorite images for Cancer is the greenhouse. And so it's this idea of like a special place, or the nursery, a special place that's set aside so that those who are fragile might grow in a fashion, in a way that they would not be able to grow like on the outside, right? So a greenhouse is going to be especially warm, and it's going to be protected in some kind of way. Even if it's a glass wall, then there's still a wall that separates what's inside from the outside. It's a place to hug up the babies, right? And so putting Mars into that place is going to be, so Mars is, it's not just warm, it's like extreme warmth. It's heat, it's hot, right? So we can think about like fires, or separation, or severing, or blades, or any of this kind of stuff when it comes to Mars. Mars is typically associated with conflict and tension. And so Cancer is a place where that can get out of hand sometimes. It can become a problem. Mars in Cancer can be really great for, you know, you need knives in the kitchen, you need fire in the kitchen, this kind of thing, right? If we're going to do some nurturing, then we need a certain amount of Mars to be taking place. But, you know, it's very easy for in the home space Mars to, or in the Cancer nurturing kind of space for Mars to kind of like do a bit of harm. Or, you know, one thing that we can often think about with Mars is like a tendency toward wild and polar emotional spaces, right? There's a sense of like, there's fragility around the emotional sort of situation when it comes to Mars. And so, and Cancer is very sensitive. You know, we can think about Cancer as being associated with crabs, right? And crabs have this like strong outer protective layer, and that is because it's so soft on the interior that like if anything touches it, then it becomes then you can run into problems pretty quickly, right? It gets pretty painful. And so Mars in that space, if you touch that thing, then Mars is ready to fucking fight about it. Mars is ready to like chop some heads over it, right? And so, you know, we can think about like mama bear kind of energy. Like if you get too close to the nest, then it's like, now we got real problems and we're going to tear you to shreds, like that kind of thing. So Mars in Cancer is going to be sort of like provoking this kind of feeling in the space at large. We're going to have a lot of Mars in Cancer. We're after Mars makes it through Cancer, then we're going to see a retrograde station in early Leo, and Mars is going to head back into Cancer. We're going to see an opposition to Pluto there in Cancer. So what I'm getting at here is that there's a strong sense of discomfort, that where Cancer typically prefers comfort. Cancer typically prefers things that are delicious and nourishing and that taste good and that sort of like build you up in some kind of way. That is not Mars's preference. Mars's preference is smelting iron. Mars typically is associated with things that are necessarily uncomfortable. Athleticism, for example, this kind of thing, right? So moving Mars into that space of Cancer, and that you know, like, and that's the moon's domain. So no matter where the moon is, then the moon is going to be sort of like responsible for what goes on with Mars. So there's a lot of discomfort, and Mars and the moon being ruling Mars, or being responsible for Mars in Cancer, is a little like having a raggedy dog who's poorly trained in your house, and you have to be in other places sometimes. It's like there's always something to worry about with that, right? So with this in mind here, new moon in Virgo opposite to Saturn in Pisces, ruled by Mercury, who is square to Uranus in Taurus. There's something here about some kind of uncomfortable situation that might put you into a bit of a spot, but there might be a new way to think about things. There might be a next line of inquiry, or there might be some threads to pull on. Or if we're thinking Virgo, I like to think about like small details that you can inductively put together to make a new structure or a new way of approaching things. And so this might be a really good week for building that up and coming to some new ideas. Go check out Zamboni for